Welcome to Season 6 of the Dementia Researcher ISTAART PIA Relay Podcast. In this special series, we've invited members of ISTAART's professional interest areas to interview each other in a unique relay format. One guest becomes the next's host, and the conversation keeps moving episode by episode. ISTAART, part of the Alzheimer's Association, brings together researchers, clinicians, and professionals dedicated to understanding and treating Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. We'll be releasing one episode each day in the lead-up to this year's Alzheimer's Association International Conference, taking place in Toronto and online, showcasing the vital work of ISTAART PIAs and talking hot topics in research. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the series.
I'm Colin Groot, and I'm an assistant professor at the Alzheimer Center in Amsterdam. I'm also the junior trainee in the Atypical AD Professional Interest Area of ISTAART. Today, I am delighted to be talking to Marta Del Campo from the Biofluid-based Biomarkers PIA. Hi, Marta. Can I start by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us which PIA you are involved with?
I'm Marta Del Campo. I'm the head of the Fluid Biomarker Facility at BarcelonaBeta Brain Research Center in sunny and right now very hot Spain. And I'm the chair of the Biofluid-based Biomarkers PIA at the ISTAART.
Well, to start things off, maybe you can start to quickly tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit more, and also a little bit about your research and what brought you into the dementia research sphere.
Actually, I would start for the second question, what brings me into dementia research. And it was basically, I think I've always been fascinated by how the brain works and because it makes what we are, and especially memories, it makes what we are and how we consider life, if we like it, if not, it's about our memories. So I was also very intrigued about the biology behind. I'm a biologist, so I was very intrigued about the mechanisms and pathways that leads to lose our memories. And that's why I think little by little that I enter into the field of dementia. And I'm a biologist by background, and I'm really working to the biofluid-based biomarker field because that actually, we started with CSF that really reflects those pathological changes that the brain undergoes. And now, of course, with the huge developments, we are also moving into plasma, of course. Mm-hmm. So really interested of what the field is bringing us.
And it also ties nicely into my next question. So you mentioned the plasma-based biomarkers that are taking the field by storm, let's say. But what are the hot topics other than plasma biomarkers in general within the field of biofluid markers that are really going to be hot in the coming months and maybe will play a big role at AAIC?
Is there any big topic other than plasma biomarkers? That's the question.
I have seen some other
kidding.
posters.
Yeah. Just kidding. No, I think that there are two main hot topics. One is plasma biomarkers, of course, and the other is that we have now approvals of therapies, of biological therapies to counteract AD. So we really need to understand. I think there's been a paradigm shift in the field of Alzheimer's because we need another way to study this disorder. Rather than observational studies, we have another field that is intervention studies. So biomarkers are going to play a crucial role in this and to see how these different drugs work, what mechanisms are affected, which ones not. So I think this is going to bring a new era. We need to still working on plasma biomarkers. It seems that it's a little bit tedious, but we need to work, and we are going to see a lot of this in AAIC. I think how we implement this in clinical settings, are we ready for that? How this is going to change the patient journey, especially, whether it's finally useful or not. And then from a more translational research perspective, I think we are living in an era also we are experience a lot of huge technological developments. And that means that, for example, we can measure now with several different types of protein errors, thousands of proteins in one drop of blood or CSF. That means that we can include now proteins within the omics field, and we can integrate this different knowledge with very well phenotyped data sets. And I think that will, considering that proteins is, of course, I am biased, no, because I work in proteins and biofluids and everything, but considering that proteins brings the function of the different systems and the cellular models as one play a major role into the functionality, I think this time of omics combination, especially I'm thinking about qPCRs, protein and genetic information, this integration will provide huge insights into the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative dementia, which we should not forget also, because it's not all everything Alzheimer's. There are many other things there that we need to understand in order also to understand Alzheimer's.
I definitely agree. And also following up on that, you mentioned like Alzheimer's disease, most of the biomarkers that are available now clinically are focused on amyloid and tau, right? There have been some developments in the field of alpha-synuclein and TDP-43 proteinopathies. Can you tell us a little bit more about those other types of proteinopathies other than what's associated to Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, definitely. I think there has been huge steps regarding to alpha-synuclein. It's very important because it characterizes dementia with Lewy bodies, for example, and it also, of course, plays a role in Parkinson's disease. And we see that the seed amplification assays, these novel technologies, are really hitting, but to be honest, it's more than the paper said, and it seems that they are not so easily reproducible. So we need to still see how, despite when they work really well. We need to see how they bring it into the clinical practice, because I think it's not going to be that easy. And that means that there is a lot of space for doing more research. We need more markers. There are upcoming proteomics studies both in DLB and FTD, which are revealing very, very, very interesting markers, and we need to follow up on those and what do they reflect. Regarding TDP-43, we don't even have these technologies that we use for alpha-synuclein, so we really need biomarkers. And I think that's a very hot topic field also. Frontotemporal lobar degeneration, it's extremely complex, and we need biomarkers for that. And there are very interesting proteomics studies upcoming, some from our team and collaborators, so I don't want to do advertisement, but the truth is that we do.
Yeah, well, there's no reason to be modest if you're producing nice results. Stepping a little bit back, like also the what you talked about, right? So the integration into the clinic, but also into maybe clinical trials with these disease-modifying treatments that are available for Alzheimer's disease. As a neuroimager to a biofluid researcher, what do you think is the relative role of neuroimaging and biofluid analyses in clinical trials and also clinical implementation of disease-modifying treatments?
Well, I think something I also thought about that, like, of course, I'm biased. I said, like, well, now we are going to get the place of imaging, and they are nothing to do. Well, not farther than that. It's a completely. And then I was thinking, I was like, no, that's not true. Biomarkers just give us the big picture, but imaging, I think, is very important also, and we have to work together to get which area and which places are these changes occurring, no? And I think that's very relevant to understand also what's going on and which things needs to be done still. I think we need more work together, actually, working together into the specifics of different tracers and how this change these different fluid biomarkers. And I think to be more specific, one of the next steps in this collaboration that maybe we can start through the ISTAART PIA actually is to understanding the role of GFIP. As a fluid biomarker, no? And I think here, with the looking into the imaging tools, maybe we can get more important insights about this marker.
So it's more about collaboration and less about competition.
Exactly.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Moving on to a little bit more about the PIA itself. So you are the chair of the Biofluid-based Biomarkers PIA. And can you tell a little bit more about how the committee is organized and what's it made up of, and what your yearly activities are around PIA?
So we have different chairs or sub-chairs, that programs chairs and community chairs, which also gets in charge of all this sharing information with the social media and so on. And they have executive committee members. And the nice thing is that together we span the whole different profiles and different career stages. So it's a very rich community for discussion and for doing new ideas. I think that's probably, I don't know what is your experience, Colin, but I think it probably goes with all the PIAs, no?
The same,
When I joined, I actually joined as a junior executive committee member. I was not expecting much of it, to be honest. And I was really greatly surprised because it's a place for networking and to see what other things and for scientific discussions itself. And it seems sometimes you may feel like, okay, another meeting of 1 hour, what I'm going to do. But to be honest, I see that there are a lot of activities that we do there. And I think that this is general to all the PIAs again. But we do a lot of activities in terms of webinars, in terms of preparation of hours, of making the year in review, which I think is super important for the field to have this kind of setups. And they are very, very well done. And we have also actually publications going through cross collaboration. That's what I was saying. Like, Colin, maybe we should initiate something with neuroimaging regarding this work. Because we have cross collaboration, for example, with the Down syndrome PIA, and this led to a paper with FTD PIA, and that led to also a paper of how the biomarkers impact for FTD. Now there is a very active working group in the trying to work in the analysis of how to implement the different biomarkers in clinical settings. What are the challenges? How can we tackle this challenge? So it's very active and gives you it's a great opportunity to interact with other researchers that you often don't interact.
So I was going to ask, so I'm from the atypical Alzheimer's disease PIA. You are from the Biofluid-based PIA. So I was wondering about, can you tell us a little bit about the if there are specific biofluid signatures of atypical AD? We obviously know neuroimaging signatures and clinical profiles. Is there a role for biofluids in the differentiation between atypical variants of Alzheimer's disease?
It's funny that you asked me this question because the other day in the meeting of this PIA, there was a working group evaluating the biomarkers for atypical and typical Alzheimer's disease. And the fact is that so far the preliminary investigations that they did is that there were not much difference between another, but they just checked for some markers. So actually what we thought is, okay, let's talk together, let's sit down and talk together and see which other markers can be of interest, because maybe we can find something. Obviously, maybe it's not p-tau or it's not the amyloid betas or things like that, but there might be other markers that actually are worth implementing. So if we have the data here, let's do that analysis and maybe take an outcome out of it. I don't know, a paper or a review, even if it's negative also. We should make
certainly
this open to everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the atypical, there's not a lot, at least not published, right? So on the atypical variants and biofluid, it's also thinkable that there's a negative result there. But like you said, it's incredibly important to assess it, just to have this knowledge available. We had a debate going at the Conferences in Neurology conference in Prague this year about including atypical Alzheimer's disease cases into clinical trials, and especially for those trials where biofluid is an endpoint or secondary endpoint, it would be really important to know whether there are actually differences between the two.
And actually here with this postcard, I would like to highlight the importance of negative findings, that sometimes it's like, oh, it's negative, and you put that into the closets, and it's very relevant to really publish negative finding, and we have to find a solution to do so, because we need to know what doesn't work also, and in order to prevent people doing exactly the same thing or move the field forward.
I certainly agree. So then there should be a negative finding journal, where everybody.
Maybe we should build it.
we can organize it. Maybe this is our first collaboration between the PIAs. No, I certainly agree. I think there's a whole lot of money and energy being lost in projects that are already known to be negative, but were not published. So taking a step back and looking at the PIA a little bit again. So we obviously have AAIC coming up in Toronto this year in July. Hope to see you there, by the way. So what are the PIA organized activities that you have planned for AAIC specifically? And and on maybe also worth noting on which day for anybody who is in Toronto who might want to attend.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend this year to the AIC because of baby caring duties.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit far away, but I will be following it online, of course. From the PIA, we have a very exciting program, I think, and very busy as always. I would like to. There is this workshop in the PIA days just before the conference, and there is this fluid biomarker workshop about the basics of fluid biomarkers. But we discuss a lot of things. It's very engaging with very good speakers, high top speakers. We speak about classical biomarkers both in CSF and plasma, but we discuss also emerging biomarkers in other non-AD dementias, as we said that this is very important. Regulatory guidelines, how to develop biomarkers, also how important it is, which are the things that you need to do, what are the things that you need to check in order to make them valid. Regulatory things, how the biomarkers looks like within the clinical trials space. So I recommend everyone to join. It's a very, very good workshop, and that will be I'm not sure which day it is, but it's within the days before the AAIC starts. And then we have a PIA day also. We are participating in the PIA day and in that we have organized a session with very renowned panelists, and the idea is to promote a discussion of where we are and where do we want to go in the field of biofluid-based biomarkers. So it's really a forum to discuss what is out there and what needs to be done and what the people think, what are the doubts, and try to work together towards that. I'm not sure if it depends whether the person go, but we have there will be a year in review award, and we will a publication award. And we will hand in if the person is there during the PIA day also. So stay tuned about the winner. And another activity, and this is to promote especially to postdocs and early career researcher and PhD students, think that there is hours for poster presentations. And so your posters will be evaluated during the AAIC. and yeah, it's very difficult competition. I already took a look, some preselections and everything, and then there will be discussions on site and be there because it's very stimulating and there might be an award waiting for you.
So that's really focused on early career researchers.
Yeah. What are your plans for the Atypical PIA?
We have a very similar plan. So we have a poster competition that's planned for the specifically focused on early career researchers, featured research session, a PIA day, also workshop groups, also a general discussion on the role of atypical Alzheimer's disease in disease-modifying treatment trials. So I think both of our topics are really moving in the same direction, probably also with the same goals. And it's very nice to hear also that the biofluid-based PIA is also giving a podium to early career researchers who might otherwise be a little bit hesitant about becoming involved. But with this kind of competitions and also these open work groups where everybody can join.
Yeah.
I think that's a great initiative to get those early career researchers, give them a springboard towards being a later career researcher.
We need them. We need fresh thinking. I'm biased, obviously, so I need someone that is not biased.
And also in the same vein, so your PIA executive committee is focused on biofluid analysis. But what kind of backgrounds are in your executive committee? So are you all really in the biofluid sphere? Are there neuropathologists or neuropsychologists? And what do you think might be very relevant to your PIA to have more of a pathological perspective or clinical perspective.
I think it's very nice because we have a whole spectrum of profiles. We have biologists, we have clinicians, and we have people that have worked a lot within the industry also. So we have a very mixed profile. Now that you mentioned, it would be very nice to have neuropathologists to see how this work with the latest pathologies, how co-pathologies impact different fluid biomarkers. So I think it could be great if some neuropathologists would like to join in the PIA. Also something that, but there is also a PIA related to that, is about the statistics. I think when we are entering now, especially in the omics era, how to deal with this analysis, what are the best analysis now if we have to account for different or multiple comorbidities, would be nice to how to get this statistical power. But again, there is a specialized PIA for that, so maybe a little interference, or maybe we can create another workshop of how to do these things. Working group. I think that it's very important that the different PIA gets different profiles. That definitely.
I definitely agree. There are a lot of PIAs out there, so it's also logical that there's some specialization going on within the different groups. But I think most of the areas of research and also the type of research, like statistician, like you said, clinical research, is very important to incorporate also in order to have a holistic view of your topic. Also, along those same lines, so you mentioned statistics, right? On omics data is like infamously complicated. What is the role of AI or let's say machine learning in having the integration of all that omics data into something that's interpretable for someone, for instance, in the clinic?
I think that's the next step up. There are many studies now working with these big IHI proposals, working on how we are going to benefit from AI. I think it's under development, but probably it will come. I really envision that it will be a platform or some kind of algorithm that can integrate not only fluid biomarkers, but also the imaging data, all the different cognitive tests and all kind of different factors that may influence the phenotype. We can speak even about environmental factors, all these kind of things that to some extent influence a little bit the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. I think this AI can really make this integration into an algorithm that makes later on interpretable to the clinician and say, okay, still, I think it's important to have the clinical symptoms out there and person by person, but I think it will in time probably get to make the things easier to really work towards personalized medicine, because probably we'll get different subtypes of Alzheimer's disease which may require different types of therapeutics, and I think that's where we can benefit a lot.
Yeah, I agree again, because like sometimes it seems like, for instance, neuroimagers and biofluid researchers speaking a little bit the different languages, and certainly the genomics side of things. So we can, other than obviously collaborating and trying to get familiarized with all the types of different data, we can also use AI to have that do that for us, and especially in the clinic, where an integration of all of these types of different info is not feasible to be done by a clinician. It can definitely be aided by something that's automated or computerized.
The challenge of AI, I think, is validation. How are we going to validate in a way that we are sure that it's telling us the true thing? And this likely requires a lot of a very important thing that usually we don't think about, that this really requires a lot of samples. Let's say we need huge samples, which means a lot of phenotyping, that we need to create these cohorts and we need support to create these cohorts, and we can collaborate across cohorts. In Alzheimer's field, that might be a little bit easier, but in fields like frontotemporal dementia or dementia with Lewy bodies, that's extremely difficult. And we really need to collaborate across centers, and there needs to be funding in order to create these cohorts.
Yeah, that is really important also for the generalizability of results, right? So on single site results are obviously very needed and necessary, but to have a really holistic view of what is happening within different patient groups and also the relationship of, for instance, demographics, but also other clinical characteristics. You need large samples and need them from different sites. So their collaboration is obviously key. It's a must, exactly. So if I just can ask you one final question. So along those same lines, so there has been a lot of attention recently on the differences in, for instance, Alzheimer's disease pathology between sexes and also between ethno-racial backgrounds. What is the current status of biofluid research on those markers? Are there any hot topics with regards to, for instance, those factors relating to differences in biofluid levels?
Well, for the classical markers, it seems there are some difference, but not. We also have to think like, okay, if there is a difference, is this meaningful in a way that it really influences the final outcome? That is, do you have A beta pathology or not? And I think most biomarkers show that there are some difference, but it doesn't really change the major outcome. Let's say it doesn't have a big impact. And that said, we need more studies in order to really check that in large cohort and in different cohorts. Also, in terms of ethnicity, we really need to see how same way we are trying to validate it in real world scenario. That means real world scenario. We need to diversity and include these cases, which is not easy because there is a lot of. We have to be careful about that also. No, there are a lot of socio-demographic characteristics that influence also depending on the region where you are allocating this or collecting these samples. So what is influencing the biomarker status, the socioeconomic status or the ethnicity and everything. So we have to be careful also in order to avoid stigmatization. And something that we need to think about, but definitely we need to do it. And that's something that we are doing at Barcelona with Marta Del Campo, the PI, is doing a special study focus on that, trying to see how it influences the biomarker status. And I'm aware that there are many other researchers trying to do. CIUDEMO, which is an executive committee also in the BBPI, is working on that. And many other researchers. So we need also to move in that direction too.
Very important research, I think. And also what I find interesting, but I do not encounter as a neuroimager, obviously we have protocol differences, but I always find interesting also the handling of the biofluid samples themselves, how that can also influence eventual results. So I was always not very aware of that until these publications came out, and like processing times, freezing temperatures and stuff. I was like, oh, this all has a major influence. Yeah. So it's an extra complication that you in the biofluid sphere encounter.
Yeah, we are lucky in a way that there was a lot of work done previously in the field of CSF biomarkers in relation to pre-analytical factors. So basically we could test it, and that's something that with the GBSC, which is a global standardization consortium, which is led, I think, by Henry Zetterberg, Kai Bleno, and Charlotte Tunisen, among other people. They are really working on this, on standardizing these factors and plasma biomarkers. And the good thing is that since we learn a lot from the CSF field, we have applied all that knowledge into the plasma field. So it has been much quicker because we look for the problems rather than the problems came to us. We look whether those problems were there. And I think it's moving very, very fast. So it is a problem, but we are solving it quickly. And the take-home message here is that use the learnings for your future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it can save you a lot of time.
So science is also not, it shouldn't be simple, right? But it's good that you are aware of the problems already, and you can try to see whether the CSF results also translate to plasma. So you're basically getting a head start there, which is not saying that it's going to be easy, but easier.
We like when it's not easy, actually.
Yeah, of course, we like a challenge. Well, Marta, thank you very much for all the information you gave us. I think it was a very nice overview of what your PIA is doing, but also what is happening in the biofluid field of research. With that, I would like to thank you very much, and it's time to end today's podcast. But before we go, I do have a final question. What advice do you have for someone who is learning about ISTAART and how has it helped you being involved in ISTAART as in the Biofluid PIA?
Yeah, I think that you should join ISTAART. And it seems marketing, but as I said before, it's a huge opportunity for networking with different people of different profiles and to bring your ideas up into action. They will support you, so don't hesitate to join.
I agree. That's also why I joined up. And that was really the final question. And I would like to thank you again, Marta, for taking the time to join us today. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. You can find profiles on myself and my brilliant guest, Marta, and information on how to become involved in ISTAART, like we have done in the past, on the website at dementiaresearchers.nih.ac.uk. And also at www.alz.org/ISTAART. There's a link in the show notes. I'm Colin Groot, and you've been listening to the Relay podcast from Dementia Researcher and the Alzheimer's Association. Hit subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app to ensure you don't miss an episode.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Marta.
The Dementia Researcher podcast was brought to you by University College London with generous funding from the UK National Institute for Health Research, Alzheimer's Research UK, Alzheimer's Society, Alzheimer's Association, and Race Against Dementia. Please subscribe, leave us a review, and register on our website for full access to all our great resources. dementiaresearcher.nih.ac.uk.